What's going on, everybody? Got another story for you from the golden era of basketball. There are moments in NBA history that never happened, but every real fan from the era remembers them anyway, because the rumors, the conversations, the tension, it all felt real. And sometimes the almost deals burn into the memory just as much as the ones that actually went through. Now, today we revisit one of those moments. A what-if kind of moment, so big that it could have changed two franchises, kept one superstar from ever leaving, and rewritten an entire chapter of mid-2000s NBA history. Allen Iverson to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Allen Iverson teaming up with Kevin Garnett in his prime. Two killers, two MVP-level forces. One ball, one desperate franchise. It didn't happen, but it came close enough to make the basketball world talk, and close enough that Kevin Garnett himself remembered it years later as the Christmas gift he never received. Now let's go back. Let's walk through it like someone who lived through that era, because many fans today don't realize how real this almost became. 2006 was a pressure cooker. By 2006, the NBA didn't look anything like it does today. There was no player empowerment era, no super team culture built on banana boat friendships. If a star wanted out, the team still had leverage, and teams weren't scared to ride unhappy players all the way until the wheels came off. Allen Iverson had reached that point. He'd carried Philadelphia from the moment he arrived. He turned a mediocre roster into a finals team in 2001. He dragged squads full of grinders and role players through the East. He won scoring titles, MVP, All-NBA, and gave the franchise its identity. But it wasn't enough. Not because of effort. AI, we know, always gave everything. He gave Philadelphia everything he had. Not because of production. He was still a top scorer in the league. It was simply time. Time for a rebuild. Time for a reset. Time for both sides to admit that almost wasn't turning into a championship. So the Sixers opened the door. They were finally ready to move their franchise star. And that's when the Minnesota Timberwolves, or more specifically, Kevin Garnett himself, tried to kick that door down. Now, if you didn't live through this era, you might not understand how desperate things were getting in Minnesota. Kevin Garnett wasn't just a star. He wasn't just an All-NBA forward. He wasn't just an MVP candidate. He was the Timberwolves. Everything they were, everything they hoped to be. Every playoff run, every broadcast, every piece of relevance, all of it flowed through KG. And the franchise was wasting him. They had already blown the best roster they ever put around them, the 2004 Western Conference Finals team with Sprewell and Cassell, and they never recovered. Year after year, KG was putting up monster seasons, playing elite defense, anchoring the team, and dragging lineups that looked like G League rosters today. By 2005-2006, frustration was boiling over. The Wolves were stuck in the mud. No second star. No real help, no direction. And then the news started spreading. Philly is finally moving Allen Iverson. KG reacted instantly. He didn't play it cool. He didn't hide behind front office politics. He went straight to management. Get him. Do something. Don't waste this chance. Kevin Garnett genuinely believed that pairing him with Allen Iverson could resurrect the franchise. He didn't care about fit. He didn't care about two ball-dominant scorers. He didn't care about analytics or spacing or anything like that. He cared about heart. He cared about fire. He cared about bringing in a dog who could go to war with him every single night. And the AI was exactly that. Garnett even admitted later, that would have been a very, very nice Christmas present. That's not casual language, that's diplomacy. That's a superstar begging his franchise to give him a real shot. Every real fan from that era remembers how badly KG wanted it. But the Wolves ran into one problem they couldn't escape. They had nothing to offer. This is where the Minnesota's entire situation fell apart. To get Iverson, you needed assets, picks, players, contracts, something to match the value. Minnesota? They had none. No extra picks, no young blue chip players, no trade filler that Philadelphia would want, no expiring contracts that mattered. Worse, Garnett was their only star, and they weren't trading him for Iverson. The entire point was pairing them, not swapping them. The Sixers made that clear early on. Minnesota wasn't in the running. They didn't have the ammo. They couldn't even fake a competitive offer. So the Wolves watched helplessly while another team, one with real assets, swooped in. The Nuggets weren't contenders, but they had something Minnesota didn't: tradable value. Andre Miller, Joe Smith, 2 first-round picks. Enough pieces to make Philly say, yeah, let's do it. Denver pulled the trigger and landed Allen Iverson. KG saw the news like everybody else did, and in typical Garnett fashion, he gave you the honest truth instead of the polished PR answer players give today. He basically, literally said this: it's going to be interesting to see 2 top scorers play with 1 ball. Translation from veteran fan language: this could work, or it could blow up. He also said he knew Andre Miller made life easier for Denver's guys, and Iverson would now do the same for Carmelo Anthony. And at the time, that was a real basketball conversation. Melo and AI were 2 of the most explosive scorers in the league. They were killers in isolation. They were volume beasts. They put pressure on defenses. On paper, terrifying. On the court, not so much. They could both get 30. They could both cook individually, but the team didn't elevate. There wasn't the fear factor people expected. There wasn't the defensive bite. There wasn't the championship trajectory. After a season and a half, the experiment ended. Denver moved on. And back in Minnesota, Kevin Garnett kept waiting for help that never came. Now, this is the heart of the story. This isn't about Denver. This isn't about Carmelo Anthony. This isn't about how the Iverson-Melo pairing fizzled out. This is about the Timberwolves. This is about the pressure building. This is about what could have saved the franchise from losing their only real superstar. Minnesota missed the playoffs again in 2006. Another wasted year, another season of monster stat lines from KG, with nothing to show for it. Then came 2007. The Timberwolves fired their coach midway through the season. Nothing changed. Another losing season. Another early off-season. And that's when Garnett snapped internally. He never made a scene. He never trashed the organization publicly. He never made himself a villain, but he knew it was over. If the Iverson deal had happened, if Minnesota had paired KG with a superstar who played with the same edge he did, if the Wolves had given him just one other elite player, there's a real chance Garnett never leaves. Remember, KG wasn't ring chasing in today's sense. He wasn't running to form a super team. He was loyal to Minnesota, almost to a fault. All he wanted was a fighting chance. AI would have given him that. 2 MVP-level competitors, 2 leaders, 2 warriors who played every game like it was life or death. If that duo forms, even if the roster is thin, Minnesota becomes a playoff team again, a West matchup nightmare, and a franchise with real direction. And more importantly, Kevin Garnett probably doesn't ask out. But the Wolves didn't get Iverson, and they didn't get anyone even close. So in the summer of 2007, after years of wasting elite production, they honored Garnett's trade request, and the league changed instantly. In July 2007, the Timberwolves' final chapter with Kevin Garnett closed. Boston sent a massive package. Al Jefferson, Ryan Gomes, Sebastian Telfair, Gerald Green, Theo Ratliff, cash, and multiple picks. It was the biggest blockbuster trade in years. And overnight, Garnett went from carrying a franchise alone to being in a system designed for winning, surrounded by talent, shooting, defense, coaching, and structure. For the first time in his career, he had the environment he deserved. KG didn't waste it. In 2008, he anchored one of the greatest defenses of the era. He led the Celtics to the finals, and he helped beat the Los Angeles Lakers in 6 games. He became an NBA champion, something Minnesota never gave him the opportunity to achieve. But rewind the tape. If Iverson goes to Minnesota in 2006, does Garnett ever become available for Boston? Does he still ask out? Does he stay loyal to the Wolves? Does AI revive Minnesota long enough to change NBA history? Now, these aren't small questions for basketball fans. These are timeline-altering questions. Basketball is full of what-ifs. This one sits near the top. Now let's talk pure basketball. Could Allen Iverson and Kevin Garnett have coexisted at an elite level? Absolutely. This isn't modern 2 stars with identical play styles. AI was high usage and ball dominant, no question. But what people forget is that he was also an elite passer, an underrated pick and roll operator, a player who thrived with finishers and rim pressure, someone who always needed a defensive anchor behind him. That's Garnett in a nutshell. KG would have covered every defensive weakness AI had. AI would have given KG the offensive partner he spent a decade begging for. Minnesota would have finally had a lethal 1-4 pairing, a true clutch time scorer, a superstar who took pressure off KG, a leader with edges that matched KG's intensity, an identity built on toughness, grit, and relentlessness. They played the same way. Their emotion during games were the same. They fit. Allen Iverson fit better definitely with KG than I think Carmelo Anthony in Denver. You don't need deep analytics for this one. You just needed to watch the era. It would have worked enough to matter. Would it win a title? Probably not. Not by itself. The West was stacked. But Minnesota wouldn't have been irrelevant. They wouldn't have collapsed. And they damn sure wouldn't have lost their franchise player the next summer. Now, Garnett wasn't complaining about playing with mediocre teammates. He wasn't crying for an all-NBA roster. He wasn't asking for 3 stars like today's superstars. He just wanted one guy. One other elite player, one other warrior like him. One other star who played hard every night. AI was that guy. Minnesota failed Garnett. Not because they didn't try, but because their previous mistakes left them without the assets to attempt the trade. Bad drafting, bad contracts, blown roster moves, a lack of long-term planning. By the time Iverson became available, the Wolves had already boxed themselves into a corner. This what-if hurts because it was preventable. Minnesota had one of the greatest two-way players of all time and couldn't build anything around them. They had a chance at redemption and couldn't do anything about it. They had one window left to save their superstar and it slammed shut before they could grab the handle. In the end, Allen Iverson went to Denver. Garnett left Minnesota. One star chased a new chapter. The other found redemption in Boston. The Timberwolves fell into years of irrelevance. And a pairing that could have defined the early 2000s never existed. It never happened. But the shadow of the idea never went away. For older fans, this sits right there, with Kobe almost joining the Bulls, T-Mac and Grant Hill actually staying healthy, Chris Paul to the Lakers, Shaq staying in Orlando, Duncan nearly joining the Magic, and Jordan to the Knicks in the mid-90s. It's one of those stories you remember not because it happened, but because it almost did. And you still wonder, what would the league have looked like then if Allen Iverson had ever worn a Timberwolves jersey and Kevin Garnett had finally gotten the help he deserved? I hope you guys liked this video and the story. Like, share, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys in the next one. More to come. Peace.